forum on the call. So just a few other quick announcements. Nikki, I see your hand. We'll get back to you. But the big news in our world on our county campaign, moving forward with climate emergency declarations, with climate action planning, and in the hopes of getting a countywide climate coordinator, the big news, thank you, Oshtemo residents. Oshtemo declared a climate emergency just this past Tuesday at their most recent board meeting. Steve, I was hoping you might be here and share. I know many of you sent your thank yous, and we need to get a copy of that resolution. Steve, would you share the response, just the content of the response that you got from one of the board members?
Do you want me to read it?
Sure. Just the first line, so that we can all feel hopeful about our actions. Yes.
I mean, yeah. So he wrote and said, I wanted to express my gratitude to you and the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition for your support at the last two board meetings. It was exactly what this board needed, a push from engaged residents.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this, folks. Yes, this is how it works. And so that was just like music to my ears. This is exactly how it is supposed to work. I've been back in contact with the League of Women Voters who's partnering with us. I think our next targets, I see Tom Hackley on the call, are Texas Township. And the League has a lot of members out in Richland. And I know that we were searching for some friends in Vicksburg as well. And so it seems like that would have not been the folks I would have predicted about where we would go next. But hey, that's where our members are. And that's where we think we might have some inroads and contacts. Kalamazoo Township is working on its climate action plan. That'll go back to its board working group meeting this coming Monday. Nikki's on that, and Tim are on those committees with me. And we're still awaiting our own city of Kalamazoo and other pieces, of course. So just a few announcements. This will come out in an email for you later today. There's some events, always some events, of course, going up. And a big one that I want to plug, let me get this in the chat here, is going to be on Monday, February 28th, talking about businesses today. There will be a sustainable community discussion sponsored by Southwest Michigan First on Monday, February 28th, 3 to 4:30. Too bad you have to hear from yours truly again at that event, but it's going to be focused on what we call scope 3 emissions, right? So many of us focus on scope 1 and 2, what I can control within my house or my township buildings or Western Michigan University. And scope 3 is really about that community connections. And so I'm really excited about this. They want to focus it on transportation. So get ready for that one. And let's think about how we can make all of the sectors, right? All the different people who are doing this climate work now have to be connected somehow. And that's what that discussion will be about. Book clubs coming up. I've got March 8th. I'll throw this one in there too. Will be Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire. We are on a business economic streak this particular month. That will be virtual still, of course. I know Western's on spring break that week, so make sure everybody else comes to that. And then, of course, the big news, April 12th, let me get it in there. Amitav Ghosh will join us for book club, reading The Nutmeg's Curse, Parables for a Planet in Crisis. I could not be more excited about hosting that event. The next Fridays for Future is, of course, February 25th, and we'll have Lucy Dilly from Can Do Kitchen. It's not called that anymore. Can Do Kalamazoo?
Can Do Kalamazoo.
All right, so there we go. Other announcements from anyone else before I introduce our speaker and get us kicked off? Go ahead, Tim.
Well, of course, tomorrow is the second Saturday of the month, which means the meetings of the Kalamazoo Citizens Climate Lobby chapter, preceded by the national call. Well, actually preceded by the WMU chapter meeting, then the national call, then the Kalamazoo chapter meeting. So we, of course, invite anyone who's interested to join us.
Excellent. Yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
This is a correction to something you said. The township is not going to be putting the plan back on Monday.
Wow.
Last meeting, there were enough revisions that we didn't get through all of them. And so it's going to be the following session for the township. But that's just a correction, okay?
Thank you. I will take that off my Monday night list. Awesome. Jeff.
The Western Students Writing Competition on Climate Change is open and accepting submissions. I learned today we have our first submission. It has arrived. I have not cheated and looked at it yet.
Already?
Yeah, if you're a Western student, undergrad or grad, and need more information, let me know.
Wow, that means you had something already in the bag, doesn't it? You had a poem just waiting to be submitted, I feel like. Okay, well, good for them. Okay, well, not seeing anything else. Hi, Daniel. Welcome to the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition meetings. I'll give you just a quick introduction here. Background, of course, Aquinas College out of Grand Rapids in business administration and English, folks. So think about that writing contest when we go global here later. He was a communications and member services director with West Michigan Environmental Action Council. He did his own entrepreneurial stint as a journalist. He was a prior board member with the Green Home Institute. And, you put it on LinkedIn. And so therefore I might say it out loud, Daniel. So he gave a couple really interesting things on there that I think you all will appreciate. We read, of course, Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy and got to hear her speak. And I just loved a couple of the things that Daniel talks about, how he talks about himself, saying that, he's trying to work to make West Michigan a better place for businesses to adopt environmentally responsible and social actions, right? But he's truly an emergent strategist. Here are two things that Daniel shared about himself in the public forum. He solves problems using non-linear and value-focused strategic thinking. He tries to find new angles. And the other thing that I thought was just great about how you described yourself, Daniel, he learns from his mistakes, not afraid to admit when he's wrong. As we know from emergent strategy, right? Never a failure, always a lesson is one of our guiding principles in this work, because we don't know how to do most of the things that we know we need to do, right? We don't know how to get there sometimes. And so we really honor that. And of course, for about the last, 8 years, it looks like, you've been the executive director of West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, which is a new affiliate for the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition. Everyone, please welcome Daniel.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay, Denise?
Yep, sounds good.
And and sorry for showing up a few minutes late. I didn't expect to have a speaking role in the thing that I just got off of the stakeholder meeting that I thought I'd be able to, in a inconspicuous way, take off a few minutes early, but I found that I had to was kind of called up. It was called out at the very last minute. So about as poor timing as you could imagine. But I'm really grateful for you having me today. And I'll say I wasn't entirely sure what direction to go with kind of how to share our work today. So I'm gonna talk about two specific scopes of work largely that we're engaged in, that I think is where the majority of our time is going to, and I think is probably more immediately relevant to some work we have. But I'll also share some things that I'm not going to talk about as much as some of the work that we've done over the past few years to outline the potential impacts of climate change for business institutions in Michigan, or the work that we've done to help inform the economic value of landfill materials. And if those are things that when we get to the Q&A period, we feel that, man, you really like to see some slides and graphs, I'd be happy to pull up some of the presentation, some of the slides that are on my desktop here that I didn't put up today. But so as an introduction, and thank you, Denise, for the intro, and I feel since you're perusing my LinkedIn page, I'll offer a little bit of my background as well. So, because I think the room looks to me more like it seems these are people who are more here because they have a passion for the work, and they're exploring this. They're exploring these issues and are activating because of personal callings, and not as much of kind of professional obligations. And I'll say I was attracted to this work from I don't think I'm sharing my screen. I just realized. I'm gonna do that.
There you go. I wondered if you
All
had
right.
something. Looks good.
Yeah, I did that when I was testifying before the State House last year. I went through the whole thing without sharing my slides,
Oh, no.
and I was like, nobody said anything. And then they had me do it again with my slides. So, yeah, so personally, I was introduced to this work when can we going back down my LinkedIn page when I was overseas with the with the Marine Corps and was exposed to kind of the role of pollution and social justice and racial equity and the way that all these revolve around climate and carbon and fossil fuel extraction. And it took me a few years until essentially until I was exposed to the idea, a concept of sustainable business at Aquinas to really be able to start articulating what how these things could be meaningful as a career and approach. But I like to highlight that that's kind of the perspective that I originally came from, and recognizing the value of working within institutions to be able to eventually address these issues. So our organization, if you're not familiar with it, we work to promote with business institutions to promote business practices and public policy that advance climate resiliency, community resilience, social justice, and the creation of a circular economy. Though we are based in the West Michigan area, we do business. We do work throughout the state. Most people know us through our education networking programs. In any given month, we're hosting a number of online and live events. We had a great one yesterday about webinar about agrivoltaics and the potential intersection between small acre farming and solar installations. And I'll give some plugs at the end of the program of some of the things we have coming up. And as part of this, we have a dozen or so rotating portfolio of working groups we've been involved in, including ones for circular economy, climate change, a couple of different ones focused on solid waste. We have a campus sustainability work group, and then of course the events and networking programs I alluded to. And though we are based in the greater Grand Rapids area with human resources on the lakeshore in Southwest Michigan, and most people know us, West Michigan Business Forum. We are the sponsor for a number of different regional programs, including ones in Southwest Michigan, some virtual statewide programs. A newish program in the Great Lakes Bay, Saginaw Bay area, one that we're going to announce the next year for the capital area, and are trying to do more work in the Kalamazoo area in addition to what we've been doing historically in the Berrien County, Van Buren area. So we have three strategic focuses, and I'm going to talk briefly about all of them. And highlight two tracks of work specifically today. The first one is climate leadership, and this is the Climate Crisis Coalition. But I'm not going to talk as much about that today, because to a large degree, when we're talking the business institutional space, we can think about the corporate space, but also include academia, the nonprofit world, and the public sector. They're really climate and sustainability are increasingly becoming synonyms for each other. It's really impossible to have a sustainability conversation without talking about decarbonization, and to a large degree, all the work that we do is becoming defined by decarbonization. And our two other focus areas of circular economy and social equity / environmental justice, those are largely our strategy, are becoming our strategies for how we engage in the climate leadership issues. And I'll talk a little more about some of that in a moment. I'll say some conspicuous projects that will I'll highlight briefly around some of the things we're working in climate leadership. They are in the more advocacy area. We have a partnership with the Climate Action Campaign, the Environmental Defense Fund, to activate business institutional leaders around the states to encourage their congressional leaders and appointees of the EPA to make more significant investments in federal leadership. We are less involved at the state level, largely because there's so many actors who kind of do very similar things to what we do, but we're still participants within our interest area, which tend to overlap with sustainability, sustainable business, and the circular economy. Including probably especially food waste, which is ranked at the top of the drawdown approach to decarbonization that many are likely familiar with if you've read that book, follow that work. Another point that I'll highlight, because I think there may be some people on the call have some interest in this, we are working with the REAMP Coalition and a group that includes the Center for Regional Food Systems at MSU and the Chicago Food Policy Council to introduce climate goals to regional food policy councils. I believe there's a food policy council in Kalamazoo, or at least there had been, and perhaps there's a representative on this call today. I just want to flag that we are launching a working group in the next month that will fund participation for food policy councils to help them incorporate climate goals into their work. The next area I'm going to highlight is our circular economy focus. And I'd say at this moment, if you've heard of our organization, if it's not for events, it's likely because of something we're doing in recycling, something we're doing in diversity, equity, inclusion. I think there's at least one person on the call who joined today to hear me soapbox a bit, who we're working with in this capacity. And I'm going to highlight one project that we excited about, and I think I got my slides on order here. Just give me a second. And boom, I'm going to go back. So before I get into what we're doing here, and I apologize, I hit a save before I kind of move some things around. I want to share kind of a general picture of what's happening in Michigan right now. And I don't know if you've had other people from either the state of Michigan or the Next Cycle program or others kind of speak to this group previously.
A few, not specifically on like next cycle or our solid waste though. So this will be good.
Okay. So I want to talk about that briefly, just kind of set some context for our work. So at present, Michigan has recycled approximately less than 20% of solid waste in Michigan is recycled. Our organization, we did a landfill study a few years ago. We went and pulled and sampled landfills throughout the state, working with paid student workers. I want to emphasize that we paid them to sample the material, come up with a characterization for what it was, and then add a commodity value to it. And we determined that we're throwing away approximately $400 million worth of materials each year, based on commodity prices at the time, which are variable but are incredibly high at the moment. That wasn't necessarily the case 2 years ago, but it's kind of where we're at now. That 400 million is probably closer to 800 million. And hypothetically, 85% of this could be recycled. Now, that's kind of depending on where you're at. Like in my home in Grand Rapids, I can recycle 85% of it. If you're somewhere in rural Kalamazoo County, it may be a different scenario. But if you have access to kind of standard curbside service and a commercial composting service and some common drop-off items like electronic waste, you should be able to get pretty close to zero waste without too much additional effort. And in kind of a general fair statement, I'd say the vast majority of stakeholders of Michigan, essentially across the board are not a place where they can say that they're really closing the loop, either from a zero waste to landfill point or the reuse of recycled content incorporation into their efforts. And I'm highlighting 4 trends here that I think if you have somewhat awareness of this, you're going to have a good idea of kind of what's happening in the state right now. And the first one is, and this is specific to public policy and some approaches that as you begin kind of work at the county level and to adopt these things could have some immediate relevance to you. And this is characterized by a shift from a historical understanding of solid waste management to sustainable materials management. And these same trends track, I think, along any number of other conservation issues. So stormwater, for instance, it used to be about how we get the water away from us as fast as possible. Now it's how do we use it? How do we make sure that it is processed in the ground and goes into back into the water supply in a beneficial manner. So in the same manner, most of our solid waste planning in the states is governed by a package of laws known collectively as Part 115, and these are around 20 years old. And so the vast majority of plans in the state are about 20 years old. Some counties, and this happens at the county level, from a voluntary standpoint, have taken that further, made additional investments, invested in both human and physical capital, open facilities. But those are unique, well-resourced counties for the most part. And in the best case for most counties, that they have an individual who is carrying out some limited mandates to ensure that things like household hazardous waste and larger concerns are addressed for the county, and that certain data management means are met. And then I'd say in the majority of counties, that individual probably does not have that as their full-time job. The scope of this is both public and governs public and private service. Certain areas, like where I am, the recycling center is a public asset, and the recycling service is a public utility. Other areas, it's done by private companies, and depending on kind of your political affiliation, you might I think it's often referred to as like the free market approach. And the way these are eventually reported out is according to municipal solid waste, industrial waste, and commercial and demolition waste. Now, though it is unlikely to happen from a statutory standpoint in the near future due to political winds, there is a desire to shift this entire approach to a sustainable materials management approach, and to relight the Part 115. And this actually passed this past year in the House of Representatives, and then died in the Senate. And there's always the hypothetical that could come back, but I would bet $1 million it's not going to happen this year. And depending how the elections go in November, it may or may not happen in the next 2 years. But the general idea, though, is that solid waste is no longer about landfills. It's now about recycling and closing the loop. Trend 2 I'm going to highlight is a program called Renew Michigan. And Renew Michigan is a $15 million pot of money that was created by statute to invest in sustainable materials management in the states. And through these efforts, and I say this was the stakeholder group I immediately came from today, there's programs like the Next Cycle program, which is a combination of small grants to kind of kick off local entrepreneur efforts with $10,000, and they're fairly easy to access, as well as some more intense innovation challenge tracks. This also supports a gap analysis for the states and a lot of thought leadership and kind of informing what the actual gaps are. There's market development efforts and grants. There's infrastructure efforts and grants, and there's the state's materials marketplace, which is a combination of professional capacity and online work. And it's an area where I'd say if you're a community that is at a point where you want to start investing in things, the capital is there for you to make investments if you have the political commitment or to begin moving those forward. Trend 3 I'm going to highlight is opportunity for public-private partnerships. And this is things that are happening at the tend to be happening at the local level that the state may be supporting, but are probably just more parties to, and eventually giving grants to. And the one I'm going to highlight here is the Kent County Sustainability Park. That is, though it's called the Kent County Sustainability Park, it's actually in Allegan County. And it's a potential $200 million investment that will turn the Kent County, the Kent County landfill that is in Allegan into a industrial park that will have a variety of industries taking the material that would have gone to the landfill, pulling it out through a mixed processing capacity. So they're ripping open the trash bags, taking out the material that wouldn't have thrown away, and turning it into products. Specifically in this instance, roofing installation and renewable energy projects, and to the degree possible, also moving materials into the existing commodity stream. And finally, the fourth trend I'll highlight to understand circular economy in the States is private sector leadership. The picture here is of the Herman Miller, or now the Herman Miller brand, which is now owned by Miller Knoll since its merger, of their iconic Aeron chair. And this is the Ocean Onyx brand version of it, which incorporates ocean-bound plastics. And Herman Miller has made a commitment, and I reference them just because the ocean-bound plastic is kind of a cool story. But many manufacturers are making some commitments, including some in the West Michigan area, to make investments towards this. This is being driven by shareholder activism at the largest companies. Think of groups who are becoming more vocal within their boards and winning over resolutions and kind of forcing companies from the inside to make these changes. Consumer demand and expectations. So companies are recognizing that consumers want these materials, and they're going to either pay more for it or seek alternatives if they don't find it. And of course, talent attraction. People don't like to work and be involved in organizations that are not purpose driven and are perceived as being negative to the environment. And it's very difficult at this time to attract the type of talent that essentially every business wants to employ. I think the common themes that you're seeing from these are zero waste to landfill, which is the most common, and how do we get the stuff? How do we stop throwing away things? This idea of embodied carbon, which is how we talk about this issue when we talk about it as part of decarbonization, and then of course closed loop in the circular economy. How we take material that would be destined for the landfill and turn that into feedstocks for a new life cycle of products, which I think is probably easiest to understand when we're talking about organics management, because in that sense it becomes literal feed for plants and plant-based matter that can become food products or building materials or packaging or what have you eventually. So some projects that we have underway here, and the one I'm going to reference and kind of how we're approaching shift from an industrial sense is how do recyclers and design influence specifiers, or what do recyclers and design influencers need to know about the respective needs? And where we're at right now, among many kind of things we're working at, is we've engaged for a very long time industry. We keep and we keep hearing about the challenges they have incorporating recycled content, and we keep engaging with the recycling industry, and they saying like, you know, designers and specifiers, they don't understand how this industry, how this process works, and they're making it impossible for them to close the loop. So we have facilitating dialogues and working to create guidelines and resources that can improve those level of communications and give specifiers and designers and industrial engineers the information they need to be able to early in the process create opportunity for them to use recycled content. And we're accomplishing this through two separate projects at the moment. One is our Circular Economy Forum, which is directed at product manufacturers and design community, and will take out products that will allow supply chains to evaluate their vendors for opportunities for more Michigan source recycled content. And the other is a piece that will begin shortly after that, which is our decarbonization project, and being able to begin to find this work around a carbon-centered business case for a circular Michigan economy. And then some tangents from that. We're working with the solar industry and the energy efficiency contractors industry to be able to help them understand their waste and materials management issues. Fun fact: approximately every solar project experiences around 5% shrinkage just during the middle of installation. Solar panels are made of glass. Glass breaks and shatters. These materials are fairly valuable, and electronic recyclers don't have the ability presently to process either the glass or the electronic components within solar panels. And then on top of that, you don't really need much more than a heavy rainstorm or a teenager with rocks to create an opportunity to manage recycled solar panels. And then plus we're finding more and more that there is resale opportunities for them. So over the border in the Chicagoland area, there is an IKEA that one of our members is working with that is replacing its solar panels after only 7 years, because the industry is advancing to the point where the products that were purchased and were thought to be that are going to be working for 20 years, if you have the ability of like a large company like IKEA to make that improvement investment and get better performance, you're gonna start changing these out. And we're gonna see that, I think, a lot as in the same way that, like, you know, your computer could technically last 10 years, but you probably get a new one after 3. And that's going to happen in any instance in which you really care about the performance of your renewable energy. Now, if you are interested, this is the process we're in the middle of right now. So Q1, we're surveying, doing some work for creating a framework for how we're going about this. Q2, implementation. We're going to host presentations and trainings. This should happen in the next few months, and we're expecting that people participating in this process will be able to access funding for implementation through various grant programs that the state has. And our hope is that we can identify partners and pilot projects that we can elevate through the next cycle program and others that can participate in the supply chain. And then in the third, as we kind of carry this work forward into a long-term and iterative process, how do we align that with climate goals? and to have suppliers and people who are participating in the product design, design scope, begin articulating their work so that it overlaps and intersects with the climate goals that these companies are also developing at the same time, and that's in the cases where there are companies that are making products that go into other products, such as in the automotive or furniture supply chains, how they can begin to better market themselves to their customers as part of that. And briefly, I'm going to highlight a few quick president's interests. I mentioned earlier the Food Policy Council Engagement Project. We're also involved in an initiative called Landscape for the Lakes, which is a training program for people to use compost and become composters. That's a partnership with the Michigan Recycling Coalition, and we'll be hosting trainings on that throughout Southwest throughout the summer. We have a program that we're referring to as our Waste Materials Management Coalition, which is a collaboration between the solid waste planning functions of 10 counties in Southwest and West Michigan. This is grant funded, and it comes with a schedule of tasks that are outlined by Eagle, and is a community and stakeholder engagement process. So within the counties that we're working with, and we're hopeful to work in Kalamazoo County in this way, but we're not quite far enough along where we can say that will definitively happen. We want to engage local communities and their stakeholders in both the private and public sector, and if nothing else, create a good visualization of what solid waste materials management looks like. It looks like the community, who we should be talking to, what the opportunities are from both a practice and a policy standpoint, and prepare each of these communities for voluntary or eventually mandated planning processes in the future, and immediately voluntary investments in education and infrastructure at this moment. We're heavily involved in working with the recycling industry on the promotion of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We currently have a project with the city of Benton Harbor to try to bring recycling to that community. We're currently hosting a webinar series with a national partner that's discussing these issues as relevant to recycling, and we'll be doing a program on this at the Michigan Recycling Council conference this year. And I'm going to have another slide that pitches this later, so I'm just going to skip over this one. And I'm going to do the part that I think is probably the most interesting from this for this group, is our equity focus. And over the past 4 or 5 years, our organization has worked to redefine the way that we approach our work, and try to make it to be justice centered, and think about how everything that we've historically done in sustainable business can be leveraged to benefit impacted communities that have been historically disadvantaged by say collaborative efforts of industry and government, and that has kind of given us cause to rethink most of our work, and have a lots of internal introspection and how we think about things and approach things and talk about them. And we split that work up into three different strategic focuses. The first of which is to make sustainability accessible to all. And a lot of that is one, leading by example. So our organization has a 16-point benchmarks that we report out to our board on a quarterly basis. We have a commitment to make sure that every one of our projects has a 10% set aside for DEI efforts, and we have a commitment to invest 40% of our organizational capacity into equity initiatives that benefits disadvantaged communities. This is done through sort of support of BIPOC-led business initiatives. A lot of this over the past year has been helping them access resources, preparing them for grant applications, doing trainings. So we do a lot of trainings in Spanish for Spanish language businesses, engaging Black business leaders, and then of course providing these services to the sustainability industries, and working with our peers, sometimes holding our peers accountable, and being a champion for these causes where in the places that we are, offering technical support, training, program design, to be able to make these efforts more inclusive. Somewhat of a newish and recently evolved approach for us, because we haven't historically been very active in advocacy, and that's a new area for us. And this has been a direct result of our equity programming, as we find that if we're going to be engaging with community partners, we need to kind of align ourselves with the work that's important to them. And largely, we're finding that the work that's important to them is in addressing systemic issues that do require a voice in the public sector. Things that are important right now, we've been doing a lot of work in climate justice, mentioned earlier. The points that we're really highlighting is an initiative called Justice 40, which is the commitment from the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council that 40% of the several $1 trillion are now being invested in infrastructure in climate action are going to the communities most impacted, and creating entrepreneurial and business opportunities, and making sure that the infrastructure happens and doesn't just all end up in like Ann Arbor. We do a lot of work on anti-racist capacity building within our membership, and promoting what to us is a emerging understanding of issue intersectionality. And a lot of that is, we've talked a lot about climate adaptations over the first year. This is how like our issue set is evolving as a result of it. And historically, this is kind of what we think of when we think of a climate impact. We think of blizzards, heat waves, floods, and these billion-dollar disasters that kind of characterize what is the worst of climate change. And it's an interesting point, because I think that those are the kind of impacts that we're going to experience in West Michigan. And I think we know that regardless of our efforts to reduce emissions, by the time that my 7-year-old son is my age, the climate in this region is going to more resemble that of St. Louis, Missouri. And that's it in the best case scenario. But with that said, this is still one of the better places on the planet to endure climate change, because we have access to water. We're kind of at a point where we're not going to suffer too much from increased heat and other issues. And that creates an environment where I think we're finding that we have to rethink what a climate impact really is to a region. And so for us, we're trying to start to think about how we shift our work to what we think is going to be a more demonstrative climate impact for West Michigan over the next 5-10 years. And this is, if you're not familiar with this image, this is a picture of a migrant caravan that is arguably a climate impact, as climate change has disruptive agricultural and small economies in Southwest Michigan, displacing workers who are now traveling by caravan to opportunities in the United States and other places. This is something that's happening all over the world, and I think we're going to find in the very near future, if not now, that there is no separation between immigration and social justice policies and climate adaptation dialogues. And I think we're finding that in other communities, so Minneapolis, Buffalo, there's a lot of conversation about like quote unquote managers retreats and climate refugees. And you can pretty easily have this conversation without making a climate change conversation at all. But I think we're finding that our organization, that if we want to be true to our mission, we need to become more involved, both from an equity standpoint and from a how do we respond to climate change standpoint, which is something that's going to affect our communities and economy in the very near future, if it's not already. Now, how we approach this, the general work of our equity program is through something that we refer to as a boundary organization model. And it's something that we've actually borrowed from the Great Lakes Integrated Sciences Assessment Center, which is based in our partnership from Michigan State University and University of Michigan. And the general idea is that we exist as kind of a place where other networks can meet and interact with. And we've adapted this to our general equity work, and thinking that we can use this to better partner with the community. And so the general, we want to come up with things that are mutually beneficial, establish a flow of knowledge, expertise, resources, enable it by translation, sometimes literal, speaking Spanish, sometimes metaphorical, and have a sense of co-creation and co-production, and then be able to hold everyone that we're bringing to the table accountable to what we're talking about. And a lot of this is rooted in this idea that for our organization to have a solid DEI or JEDI approach to our work, it needs to be less about how do we figure out how to bring communities and people of color to our work, but how do we make our work part of theirs. And this is something I'm going to highlight. This is a specific anecdote from the Greater Grand Rapids area. So this is the Roosevelt Park neighborhood in Grand Rapids. And on the right here, that's it. This is the University of Michigan 2 years ago did a study of census tracts in the states according to the California Environmental Justice Screen, the Minnesota Environmental Justice Screen. And I'll caveat, the state doesn't necessarily endorse this. Because like if you look at kind of what's ranking very high, it doesn't show like Benton Harbor and Berrien County, which is a conspicuous environmental justice community, or Flint, which is a famous environmental justice community. But taking the existing national industry standards on how you would identify communities that are at risk for environmental injustices. This neighborhood that is within Grand Rapids comes up as the top by a fairly significant margin, and the reason it is, and the reason it is because of systemic decisions that have impacted this community over time, including highway runs right next to it, the most busy highest in the world. There are 2 scrap yards, 2 slaughterhouses, a waste energy facility that processes the trash of 250,000 people, and a wastewater treatment plant that processes the human waste of 250,000 people, all within walking distance of the community. And on top of that, there's a truck route that goes right through the middle of it. And when we've engaged with this community, because it comes up, and that, like, you know, this is the area that is demographically speaking, pinging on all of our social justice measures, but it's also being flagged as the most impacted environmental justice community in our state. How do we get involved and talk to them, work with the business and neighborhoods, and how do we see if we can make industry part of the solution? And what we found is that the issue they cared most about was heavy truck traffic. And historically, there is a truck route that goes directly to the neighborhood on its main streets called the I-96 business spur. Now, through efforts over the past few years, we were able to get the state to take it off of their truck operators manual, and they get the city to follow suit and change its ordinance so it's no longer a truck route. But because of the way that that both are interpreting federal law, they're not willing to enforce it. So they change the signs, but they're not telling the trucks they can't go. Now, because of this, they're going to keep going there because they've been doing it for 50 years and nobody told them to stop, and that's from their understanding what they're supposed to do. So what we've gone out and we've done studies and sat and observed the trucks, so that we see 56 trucks per hour, and 17% of that is local traffic. So 83% of that shouldn't be there because it's not a truck route. And we count, and we stand in front of the elementary school that's on the corner of Granville Hall, and we count 37 trucks during the 15 minutes in which parents come to pick up school. So we're flagging these. It's like, you know, it's pretty easy to vilify the trucks and the businesses that are local, that are in the nearby neighborhood. And we went through and we wrote down who all the businesses were, and we were able to, we know where they're at, and we're now kind of reaching out and engaging with them. But we're trying not to vilify them in the process, because they're doing this because the system was designed to do this. This was a truck route up until a year and a half ago. Their understanding was that this was where they were supposed to go, and no one's telling them not to. So our role is that we create a coalition of local business, working lots of the neighborhood, and we're engaging the industry and kind of telling them, it's like, you're not supposed to, and two, it's having an impact. And I think we're also finding that they don't really want to go through that way. So now we're working together with them to identify long-term policy solutions and infrastructure investments that can get them with common cause, because the trucks don't really want to drive through these neighborhoods and worry about the narrow streets or running over children and something either. And I'm kind of wrapping up here with this, because if you look at that, if you didn't notice, so that neighborhood in Kent County is number 1. Number 2 and 3 are in Kalamazoo. And I don't know if you're aware of that, and I'm less familiar with those particular census tracts. But I'm going to hazard a guess that there's probably a similar dynamic that's going on. And if it's something that we would really like to get involved in, it'd be to engage the community partners in those areas and see if we can't find some common cause and work on those issues. And I've got 2 more slides, and I can wrap up here. I'm not sure how bad I am on time. I know I've talked quite a while.
I think it's we got a lot of great questions in the chat. So wherever you're ready to kind of wrap up would be great.
I'm going to skip forward one more and just say, like, next event I want to flag for you. March 1, we're going to host Andy Fisher, who's the author of Big Hunger, talking about how Michigan Business Institution can address the root causes of hunger. He's updated the work in his book, kind of working alongside us on looking at a post-pandemic approach for how Michigan corporations might begin rethinking their investments. And I haven't been monitoring the chat because I've been talking.
I'll help you out.
Where would you like for me to start here, Denise?
I will absolutely help you out. So first, we give a round of applause always for our guest speakers coming in. This group is a well-trained, polite folks. And just one quick clarification, Daniel. A question in the chat. We also pay very close attention. We had some eagle eyes note on your slide about sustainable materials management. The acronym says SSM instead of SMM, and so there was a little confusion about that. But I think you meant sustainable materials management, right? That's the acronym SMM.
I am, yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Tom, for pointing that out. We will fix this slide for you. But I think the first question that's in the chat is actually perfect for where you ended. Dan, I don't know if you want to ask it yourself, Daniel Bear, do you work on any alternative transportation, specifically, right, expanding or encouraging mass transit, bicycle, transportation infrastructure? Your example was really specific to the idea of environmental justice and the truck routes. And I think that's a wonderful example of the type of engagement around climate and larger issues we can do. What about expanding out to other, mass transit, bike riding, all those kinds of issues?
I would say we're spiritually supportive from like a policy standpoint. We have a small team and can't be actively engaged in everything. We'll host presentations on it. We do have an active commute week campaign that we do in the spring each year that works with employers to encourage their employees to pursue different ways of getting to work. And we're trying to stay informed on it. So I think we collaborate a lot with disability advocates, the Environmental Justice Council, and had been working with some groups on the other side of the states for a period, talking about how we might be able to incorporate vehicle miles reduced into a decarbonization strategy. So I list off a lot of things. I think we're involved, but I think not in an intentional way, and we're more observers and supporters than we are leaders.
Sure, fair enough. Susan's question about do member companies, so folks that are in the Sustainable Business Forum with you, what's the level of sort of sharing that goes on about your energy and the cost reductions, like for example, like most of us are reporting out for the Sustainable Development Goals or through the GRIs. Do you share a common metric within the Sustainable Business Forum to report out and share members' energy and cost savings?
I don't believe so. And I think it like when you say a common metric, I think we share more kind of it's more anecdotal.
Okay.
So there is a lot of facilitated peer-to-peer companies kind of talking about what they've done, how that's given them savings. From like an aggregate, we haven't like beyond what's happening in say like an EPA portfolio manager or kind of battle the building scenario. We haven't found much of a reason to kind of track that. But from a solution standpoint, we have a fairly consistent dialogue about it.
Did I answer your question, Susan? So it looks like Steve might have had to jump off. I was kind of going to ask his question too. What do you think the biggest pushback that you get from businesses in making the journey to sustainability is? What's the biggest sort of barrier that you see from your perspective for businesses?
Well, I'll say one, by the time they come to us, they don't really, they don't have kind of philosophical, they don't really have philosophical barriers. They have kind of tactical ones. It would be an oversimplification to say time and money, but, and it depends on who you are. So if you're a small business, it's time and money. Like unless you're building that into your kind of business values and philosophy, you don't want to like you're going to be reluctant to spend what you perceive as additional investments, or more than likely take the time to do it because you're already spread thin trying to run a business. From a mid-sized large company standpoint, it's just I could also say time and money, but realistically, it's just kind of the same challenges of moving it's change management. I think industry from the large part kind of recognizing that they need to do these things and is sort of figuring out like to get over some inertia to actually make them happen. And a little bit it's not knowing where to start and not having full buy-in and resources.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna jump ahead for one question I think is related, and I should have probably looked this up about all the businesses that are in the West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum. Do you typically find a certain size of business that you get the most engagement from, or is there a good mix?
I would say it's kind of a inverted bell curve of very large and small. So I think we see a lot of small companies who are somehow engaged in the industry or are otherwise supportive of the work. So people who might think of us as B Corp. And then on the other side, we see companies that have somebody that has like a sustainable business billet. So they're an AHS person or sustainable business department. And the companies that are kind of in the middle of those are the ones that we have a little harder time reaching. Because for us to do our work, we need someone we can talk to.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not actually 100%. Does anyone know? I saw Rachel Bear was on the call earlier. Does anyone know if we have a food policy council here in Kalamazoo? We might need to.
We did 4 years ago. I don't know if it's still going.
Yeah. Well, this is why we share and network and talk to each other, because let's get on that. We will figure that out. And that's sort of leading into Donna's question. You talked to us a little bit about the organic waste. Donna, do you want to ask your own question? I see you're back, or do you want me to?
Yes, sure. Hi, Daniel. Statistically, about 40% of the food that we produce is wasted, and a significant amount of that could be composted and then, reused on local farms and whatnot, local gardens. Are there any
100% of it could be
initiatives?
composted.
Pardon me?
100% of it could be composted.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
so do you know of any initiatives that we have some folks locally that are doing it. We have a bike farm. He rides around on a bicycle and collects food waste and composts it, and it's all done at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
Anything like that at a regional or a state level that you know of?
Quite a bit, actually, that are Peaking at speed, a little more in their infancy, I'd say. I can't think of anything at the state level beyond kind of the programs I've already referenced, but a lot of those involve organics management components. And there's various things that are happening regionally that are gonna articulate themselves in a couple different ways. So the community composting is probably the most common, which is like a little bit more scale than kind of what you do in your backyard. I think that's probably the bicycle program that you're referencing, and I'm gonna hazard a guess that there's a half dozen of those kind of bicycle ventures around the states of people who are sort of in a low carbon transportation, then go around neighborhoods picking up and bringing it to a community garden where there's a compost yard. And some of them scale up a little more and have vans or trucks. Those are accessible to companies and to both companies and neighbors who are kind of using more plant-based food waste. And where the larger infrastructure needs are is on the commercial composting side, or the alternatives to commercial composting. So like the in-vessel opportunities. I think Kalamazoo Valley had something that kind of fits this definition, where it's like something you have in state that's some contraption, you put stuff in and it processes it. I know the Firekeepers has one as well. And and I think that's where there's a lot of additional investment needs to be made, and that's very challenging for both capital and a policy standpoints. And I can say to my knowledge, there are efforts to bring these facilities to Kalamazoo, but they've been Kalamazoo County or Kalamazoo area, but they've been historically stymied by various reasons. So I know they've tried to locate a facility in Paw Paw very recently, and the municipality wouldn't permit them. Where we've seen the business community kind of respond to that is creating routes for commercial companies that are operating in other parts of the state. So there's a company called My Green Michigan that is affiliated with Hammond Farms out of the Lansing area. They run a route to Kalamazoo that serves businesses like Bell's and Fabrikel and Calsec, Popcat, and they'll do a pickup and they'll truck it back to their compost yard in the other side of the states, which allows these companies to compost. But I think you could also side eye a little bit, kind of like the carbon footprint of trucks going back and forth. If they make an electric truck, maybe they'd be a little easier. But long term, like there is an understood gap in infrastructure for Southwest Michigan in total, and Kalamazoo specifically, that needs to be addressed and have some of these facilities, as well as supporting education and community-based activity. And I think there is some momentum towards that, but it's not quite there yet.
Thank you so much for that. That's a big thorny one here, isn't it, folks? And thanks for folks kind of hanging out. Daniel, are you willing to hang out for a couple more minutes with us? I don't know if you have to go. Some folks have to jump off at once, so don't feel bad. Yeah. If you gotta go, you gotta go.
Rachel, hang out. Rachel asked the question about the EJ score.
Yes, thank you.
Rachel, yes, it did.
So most folks hopefully are familiar with the Environmental Protection Agency's environmental justice screening tool, where you can look up those communities and map those out. And it's a really powerful thing. And thanks for showing us Kalamazoo. I think most of us are aware of our traffic issues, especially folks who know my little corner of Kalamazoo Township. I would love to fix that. I am a cut through street of major traffic. Nikki is laughing as a former trustee for my township that had to hear my concerns over and over again for several years. I want to
Rachel, to clarify that answer, so it did, but it also used the Kalamazoo and the Minnesota EJ scoring tools as well.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that question, Rachel. I just want to kind of close here. Daniel was saying, I really appreciate all the different facets that the forum is taking on. And, we have a few business, like CalSec is on board with us. We have a few businesses, Better World Builders, and folks who kind of work in the industry that are part of the coalition. And so we would love to think with you further and have some more conversations to explore how I think we can create more of those public-private partnerships, or how we can further engage the private sector as leaders. And, this community is incredibly progressive on exactly the things you talked about, like the talent pool and, the consumer demand and sort of where we want to go. And I just wondered if that's something you would be willing to kind of, I know you and I have had some conversations about potentially doing that. Is that still something that maybe here in Kalamazoo we could do?
We're definitely interested, and I think
Okay.
I think we have an opportunity to kind of be complementary to some of the work that Southwest Michigan First is now doing.
Yes.
That we'd like to be more involved in, but really haven't been very involved in.
Okay.
Not for lack of trying. And I think we have a particular interest in exploring sustainable business from a more justice-centered approach, which I think that Kalamazoo businesses, or those who are interested in investing in sustainability, are doing it from a pretty strong leadership position. But there's only like 20 of them doing that, and it'd be good to see if there could be a larger community, and then also if amongst all, if there'd be potential to kind of shift some of that interest from like say, not to poo-poo it, but like recycling styrofoam, which I think is kind of the major issue of that group recently, but to some of the issues we've talked about, like, so how do we partner with industry to support impacted communities?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that we're going to continue that conversation. And I know Daniel knows we have if all of you aren't familiar, we have a Black Wall Street in Kalamazoo. I only follow them through Facebook, but there's a huge group that really tries to support BIPOC owned businesses, and working that equity plus the industry angle, I think would be really fascinating for us to continue to work with you on. I mean, we've envisioned sort of business campaigns. For example, we have a zero waste shop downtown, the Be Joyful. If you haven't visited Be Joyful downtown, it's like, I think of it as the food co-op for your personal supplies, right? Like, get your lotion out of a giant jar that you only have one jar at home. And I think there are a lot of businesses that we need to engage further, and we thought about campaigns, for example, right, of who we support, and having our own little kind of sticker seal of approval on those. I see our psychologist is shaking her head, but that would be a good behavioral indicator. Yes, Cindy, to like let folks know, right? Here's a business who is really doing those things, and who can we then put our market choices behind, right? And in our own community, we'd love some help with that.
Yeah. And I would say I highlighted those areas in Kalamazoo that, and I say from what I can tell, it looks like the urban core is in its entirety tracks very high for the environmental injustice.
Yes, it does.
Risks.
Yep.
And I've had some limited conversations with community partners, and would appreciate kind of any kind of knowledge or feedback as far as, if there are solutions that might be brought to the table.
Fantastic. Well, and as you well know, we are also your partner in advocacy as you foray into the final frontier here. We are nonpartisan, but that does not mean apolitical. And so we're happy to share some of our approaches or resources along those lines. And this group is getting pretty good at knowing how to give public comment, at knowing how and when to show up for certain things. And so that would definitely be an area I think that we could partner on, as well as you said, many of these things come before the state level and the federal level, and most of the groups that we work with are in some way associated with that kind of advocacy.
Well, and I'll obviously send some things your way. I could use some signatures and something coming up, and And then again, like I say, when we first talked, really excited to make the connection, looking forward to the partnership. I was at your picnic back in July.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I was like, well, who's that guy I talked to? And then you came back. Right. Thank you for following up and making this connection. And
Brought
welcome
the
to
whole
the
family.
coalition.
There were a lot of mosquitoes.
There were.
Yeah.
There really were. It was kind of brutal that day. Well,
Yeah.
well, welcome to the coalition. Thank you so much, Daniel. Let's give him a round of applause. Are there any other burning questions here before we let him get on with his probably pretty busy day?
Denise, I watched the agrivoltaics presentation he did yesterday. It was extremely interesting, extremely incredible. A lot of potential there for progress in the agriculture area. So I would encourage people to learn about agrivoltaics and help promote it.
Hey, let's share that out. We can, there's a recording of that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll share out the replay, and thank you for your support.
Absolutely. And we'll just shoot me anything that you want shared out on our email list. There's a couple thousand folks in the area, and Donna manages the Facebook and the rest of our communications. That we finally hit over 1,000 after my plea a couple weeks ago, folks, just so you know.
Wonderful.
Just over 1,000 followers. So anything that we can do to shout those things out, that's what the coalition is supposed to be about, lifting up everyone's actions in different sectors to address climate change. And so we really appreciate you being here and now being part of the coalition. It sounds like we're going to have some fruitful things to work together on.
Awesome.